Welcome to the Friends of Fantasy Benefits Baseball Podcast. I'm Justin Mason, lead fantasy writer and analyst of friendsoffantasybenefits.com. Joining me on this episode is Ray Kuhn. Ray, how you doing, my friend?
Been good. It's been too long since I've been out, doing these podcasts, but I'm doing good. Baseball is going to be here, I guess, really before you know it. We have the WBC that's going to get things started a little earlier, and in the swing of drafting and ranking and previewing and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, it is now in full swing. Kind of, football is wrapped up at least for the regular season, and once the Super Bowl hits, like all the non diehards kind of come over. So you and I are already on our stuff, getting ready. But everybody else will join us here in a little bit. Remind everybody where you can reach on social media and then plug any work you got going on right now.
I'm at Ray_Kuhn_28 on social media, and I have a bunch of stuff going on over at Fantasy Alarm from the writing standpoint. For now that football season is over, it's just NBA DFS coverage, and I'm covering, I think, the NL West for player capsules for the draft guide over there, and then be getting back into the waiver wire and maybe some MLB DFS over there once the season starts.
And, big fan of everything you guys do over there at Fantasy Alarm. I was a long-time writer for them. Miss you guys. But I'm glad you're able to come back on the pod. And you and I are probably going to try to work something out regular once these team previews are over. So expect to hear a lot more of Ray moving forward on the feed. We are talking Rangers today, which is a fun team for fantasy this year. They've been loading up on free agent talent. They've got some minor league guys that are making their way up. So let's just jump right in. Let's talk about Jonah Heim, who had a kind of a mini breakout last year. It kind of came out of nowhere. Are you drafting Jonah Heim in fantasy this year?
I want to say yes, just because, we know the catching landscape in general, I feel like it gets beat up a ton. And, the batting average, 227 last year, obviously not great, but he only struck out 19% of the time. So that gives me not to say that it gives me hope that he's going to all of a sudden go crazy and be a 300 hitter, but maybe there's a little bit of room for improvement there. He showed some pop with the 16 home runs. He's still in the middle of that lineup. Assuming the lineup itself gets better, maybe there's a little more RBI opportunity out there for him. He's not one of those guys that I'm going to reach for, especially with Mitch Garver kind of in the wings as well. But he's somebody that is going to be on my radar and probably end up on a couple teams.
Yeah, he's not like a huge target for me either, but I think he's a pretty safe option, kind of as a early C2, in your two catcher leagues. A guy that probably streams on and off your roster, right, if you decide to punt catcher in a one catcher league, which I think is a fine strategy. So, what about Mitch Garver? He's a guy that I don't even know how much he's actually gonna catch. At this point in his career, and in some leagues he won't have catcher eligibility to start the season. We know when he's healthy, he can be a pretty effective bat, but health has been an issue. Are you drafting Mitch Garver anywhere?
Maybe in a draft champions, I'll throw a late round pick on him, assuming that if he picks up the eligibility there and, as a third, fourth catcher, depending. I usually don't like to go too deep on catchers in that format anyway, but that's probably the only place beginning of the season. He's going to maybe be on my radar in two catcher leagues as potential waiver pickup. But I don't know where we're going back to the 31 home runs from 2019.
Yeah, at this point, especially with how they've added to their roster, he's probably a short side platoon bat for the most part, and then kind of a backup catcher. And you just can't trust them to stay healthy. And the fact that in most formats, outside of like Yahoo, he's probably not even going to start with the year with catcher eligibility. I'm probably fading him. I just don't know if the juice is worth a squeeze in that regard. Let's move on into the infield, talk about Nathaniel Lowe, who I absolutely love. It's a guy that I really, really liked when he was coming up, but he had this hole in his swing. He fixed that hole. He kind of closed up that hole in the upper part of the zone where he really struggled with velocity and had a breakout season last year. Do you see him continuing it in 2023?
I do. I don't want to be boring and start off the bat agreeing with you, but I think Nate Lowe is probably going to end up being one of my more highly owned players, just based on the drafts that I've been doing already. I feel like I end up grabbing him if I don't go the Alonso, Vlad, Freeman, Matt Olson route in the first few rounds. I feel like Lowe's sitting there around pick 100 or so. And previously, I wasn't the biggest Nate Lowe fan. I was almost like, okay, yeah, he's a solid corner guy. He'll get you 20 home runs, drive in a good amount of runs depending on where he hits in the lineup. And then last year, he obviously took that step forward. I don't know how much I buy him as a 302 hitter again, but even with that point, I think we're still looking at a strong first base option in that second to third tier type.
Yeah, like he's definitely not going to hit 300 again. He had a 363 BABIP. His XBA was 275. I'd expect him to hit somewhere between like 270 and 290, kind of depending on what the BABIP runs. But he is kind of an elite, contact hitter for a power guy, right? Like 70 or 87% zone contact is very good for a power hitter. He's a guy who I think does have 30 plus homer power in that bat. We'll see if he actually gets to that point, this year after hitting 27 home runs. That Texas lineup is getting better. He even, throws in some, chip in stolen bases, stole 2 bases last year, but he stole 8 bases in 2021. I like Nathaniel Lowe a lot, especially if you pass up on those options. But even if you don't, like, I'm in a draft right now where I took Paul Goldschmidt, fell to me in the 3rd round, and I couldn't pass it up. And then I still took Nathaniel Lowe later because first base is so deep that often some of these guys that probably should be going a little bit higher end up falling quite a bit. So I love him as a first baseman, but I really love him as a CI, which you're going to be able to get him in some leagues.
Yeah, 100%. And I love the point about the contact. I mean, the only thing for me is the 8-degree launch angle last year that I'd like to see. I mean, I know he made a bunch of adjustments last year, but I'd like to see that some movement there. And then if he can get that to double digits and keep everything else that he did last year, then I think we're really looking at a strong option.
Absolutely. Marcus Semien had probably one of the worst starts to a season that we've seen in a long time from a guy who's making a lot of money in the first year of his contract. But then from about May on, he was fantastic. Who is the real Marcus Semien? And are you drafting him at his current price? Because it's not cheap.
I mean, the second half Marcus Semien, he had the same amount of home runs, same amount of runs scored, pretty much the same amount of RBIs. Really, the batting average was 20 points higher, and he ran a lot less in the second half than the first half. So at 37, quite honestly, I don't know that Semien's on my radar. If I'm just looking at some NFBC draft champions ADPs here, I don't know that I don't think I've considered him yet at that price. And even at his max of 56, I'm not sure how comfortable I feel taking him because although he did steal 25 bases last year, I'm not sure what he's going to do after he only stole 8 in the second half.
Yeah, I mean, I like Marcus Semien, especially because he's just an accumulator. I mean, he's a guy who racks up plate appearances. We're talking about a guy who has now pretty much 3 consecutive years, if you don't count 2020, because 2020 is weird, right? Of at least 161 games played. He's had 4 straight seasons of the full seasons of over 700 plate appearances. He just racks up plate appearances. I mean, he just plays, he hits the top of the lineup. Then that's a really good thing for fantasy, especially if you play in deeper formats, especially if you play in things like DCs. The only problem with that is if for some reason he were to get hurt, a lot of his value is tied up in the fact that he plays so much. He doesn't have prodigious power. I think we can, look at the 26 home runs last year and say, okay, that's 26 to 29 home runs is probably right. I think you're probably right. He probably takes a step back in speed. It's probably more like a 15 stolen base guy. My main issue is like when I did my projections, I have him and Altuve at exactly the same price in terms of like what my auction values are. And I can get Altuve around later. And Altuve added the speed back after not, stealing bases previously. So, like, I'm probably never going to end up with Semien because I'm going to try to wait around and get Altuve the following round. And so, while I don't dislike Semien, I think he's fine. I'm probably going to take the cheaper option in Semien, or even wait maybe 2 rounds and try to get Altuve, or wait 1 round, get Altuve, or try to wait 2 rounds to get like Albies or something like that.
Exactly. So I was going to say, I feel like Albies has kind of dropped a little bit, and then you have somebody like Chisholm with the upside there, and the greater stolen base upside. Again, he has to stay healthy. Somebody like Semien for the past 4 years has proven to stay healthy.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's really what you want to do there at the current price.
Yeah, absolutely. Moving on over to shortstop, we've got Corey Seager, who, I mean, just on a per plate appearance basis is just a fantastic hitter. I know that the average was down last year. This is, first year, new park, new contract, new league. I don't have any worries really outside of health for Seager. And last year was the first time in a while he put up a completely fully healthy season. Where are you at in Corey Seager?
I'm loving Seager this year, especially. I mean, if you look at his ADP compared to Semien, I know Semien's second base, and that obviously goes a long way. But I mean, we've heard all the chatter about the shift and the changes there, and that's obviously not something that we can overlook. At the same time, we think we know what we know, or what we might know, or what might happen. So I don't want to get in the habit of speculating too much on Seager, say, oh my God, the 245 is going to turn into 290 just because the shift changes. But at the same time, he did hit 306 and 307 the last 2 seasons, 272 before that. His BABIP was 242 last year. He only struck out 15.5% of the time. So if you look at that, and like you said, he played 151 games last year. So if you're going to look at Seager from last year, other than the batting average, what was really the problem? The ISO is pretty much in line with where it's been the last few full seasons. So Seager's another guy that I'm loving right now.
Yeah, I'm right. I'm right there with you. Like I just, and I've never really been a Seager guy, but I feel like you're getting a discount because his BABIP was so low, and like you said, it was a 242 BABIP. But if you go and like look at like the XBA, his XBA was 283. He deserved to hit 283 last year. If he hit 283 last year, his ADP would probably have him up towards where Francisco Lindor is going. Like, I'm totally fine with him at his current price, which in Draft Champions is 71 current ADP. So yeah, I'm totally fine buying back in on a little bit of a discount for a guy who's just an elite hitter when he's on the field. All right, Josh Jung, top prospect, missed the majority of 2022 because of a shoulder injury that he sustained during spring training, played a little bit in AAA and then played a little bit in the majors, had some strikeout issues at both spots. Are any worries on Josh Jung, who looks to be the everyday third baseman now?
At the price of 215 ADP and currently in Draft Champions, to me, I'm worried there because the strikeout rate, it's been high. It's going to be a problem. I know the current state of the game is high strikeout rates, so we really shouldn't be surprised. But to me, that just speaks to maybe he's going to have a little bit of a harder time adjusting to the major league level. I don't know how much stock anyone really should be putting into the 26 games he played with Texas last year. He does have some pop. I'm not sure that I see more than 20 home runs for him, maybe 25 in a full season. In fairness to him, there's nobody really behind him right now on their current roster that I would say, okay, wow, he's going to potentially lose that playing time to somebody else. I mean, Mark Mathias, I think Jung is the priority. I think there's going to be growing pains. The problem for me, and it may burn me, is that he's being drafted close to where he should be based on the expectations if they all come to pass. And I think it's going to be rough. I'd rather take somebody a little more secure in that range.
All right, so we get a little bit of disagreement here. Throw out 2022 for him, right? He injured the shoulder. He wasn't supposed to play at all. It was supposed to be a season-ending injury. He comes back early and gets 100 plate appearances in AAA and then 100 plate appearances in the majors. I'm not worried about the strikeouts really at all. Like, I mean, he made league average contact in the zone. His swinging strike rate was 13% in the majors, which means he probably should have had like a 26% strikeout rate, not a 38% strikeout rate. 26% for a guy who missed almost the entire season and has never seen major league pitching. I'll take that kind of all day from a guy like him. I think he's got 660 grade power, a guy that can, hit 25-ish home runs probably this year in the majors, going to play every day. I actually like Josh Jung quite a bit. I think you would obviously prefer a guy who's a little bit more established, but third base sucks, man. Like, you get past those first 6 or 7 guys, and it gets pretty brutal pretty quick. So Josh Jung is a fallback option with some pretty good upside. I'm here for it.
I get what you're saying. I just don't know that I want him to be a starter for me. I don't know that how comfortable I feel with him starting day one.
That's fair. Do we care about Mark Mathias or Ezequiel Duran at all?
I think in DC's, yes. Other than that, I mean, maybe again, if there's an injury in the infield or Jung struggles, maybe they end up being a streamer. But I think that's going to be about it.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. Duran would be interesting if I had a real belief that he could find full-time playing time, but I don't see the path for him. Maybe in the outfield, or maybe if Jung is so bad they send him down, but I just don't know where Duran plays full-time.
Yeah, I was going to say maybe left field, depending what they do with Josh Smith. And then you're looking at stolen bases really from him.
Yeah. Let's move on into that outfield. Adolis Garcia was the guy that everybody was fading last year because of the plate skills. And everybody faded him to the point where he actually became just an absolute bargain at the draft spot. And he somewhat proved that he could continue to do what he is doing in terms of power and stolen bases in spite of those bad plate skills, because it didn't get better. The plate skills did not get better for him. Are you buying in at now a much more expensive price?
I am, because I think now the price is more expensive than last year. But if you put that kind of out of your head, I think the price we're paying is a fair price for somebody that drove in 100 runs last year, hit 27 homers, and stole 25 bases. I think it's a fair price for that. And now that we've seen it 2 years in a row, and he ran a little more last year than he did the year prior. But other than that, everything is relatively consistent. He did get the strikeout rate down a few percent. Again, we're not talking about somebody perfect from a skill set perspective at the plate, but I think he makes it work. We have 2 years in a row now. The launch angle, barrel rate, hard hit rate, that's all pretty stable. So I'm buying here.
Man, I just can't do it. Like, the plate skills are so bad. Like, the underlying plate skills are just so bad. I know he hits the ball hard, but you're talking about a guy with like a 77% zone contact. That's atrocious. He swings outside of the zone 40% of the time. Swinging strike rate 17%. Like, that is just recipe for an absolute disaster. Now, on the plus side, he is a fantastic defensive player, and the Rangers don't have a ton in the outfield. So, like, I think he could continue to play through some cold stretches. But, I mean, at some point, these plate skills catch up to you. Like, unless you are just have elite hand, speed, which I don't think that Adolis Garcia necessarily has. These plate skills will catch up to him at some point. That being said, like, I'm not going to beat people up necessarily for drafting him where he's going, because the price isn't as expensive. It's actually gone down from early on in draft season where I was seeing him going like the 3rd round. Now you get him.
That's too rich for me.
Yeah, now you can get him around pick 60. I get the play. I absolutely, especially if you're, like me and in standalone leagues, you are willing to punt batting average. Like this is the perfect punt batting average kind of guy.
Yeah, and I think this is also more a little bit roster construction also, because I mean, if I start off with an outfielder or two, then I'm not looking to take him unless he falls to like pick 90 or 100 as my 3rd outfielder. But if you go in with the closer round 2 or 3, you're going with a few aces in the beginning. If you take somebody like a Matt Olson or a Pete Alonso, then Garcia makes sense there because you're getting power and you're getting speed. So it's also more of a roster construction thing for me. He's not something that's necessarily going to write in to say, all right, this is my plan to take Adolis Garcia in the 5th round.
Yeah. I think it makes more sense even if you let's say, in the if you target him in the 5th round after getting like a guy, you get a starter, you get a closer, but then you also get like maybe you started your draft off with like a high average, like a Freddie Freeman type, or you got a Jose Altuve, type kind of player, and you go, okay, I've already got a pretty good average base set up. I can afford a potential average drain from Adolis Garcia. And if he doesn't drain your average like he hasn't the last couple of years, in spite of like the power and the speed and the bad plate skills, then you're really set up for a monster season because you got this guy who can, he's not killing your batting average like I would expect him to, but you are getting the massive power and speed right there. So I can understand the argument for him. Not going to end up on a lot of my teams, probably any of my teams.
All right. Yeah, I think that's fair too.
Yeah. Let's I'm just going to throw the rest of the outfield mix at you, and you can tell me if you care about any of them. Leody Taveras, Josh Smith, Bubba Thompson, Brad Miller. Like I said, this outfield is not very good. Do you care about any of these guys for fantasy?
Well, I think for starters, we have to care about Bubba Thompson. For what, it's one of those situations where we have to care about him because of the speed. He stole 18 bases in 55 games last year. The fact that he hit 265, he struck out 31% of the time, and the guy doesn't walk. So, if you're going to look at somebody, he does have some power, but he's not a power hitter. But if we're drafting somebody for their speed, they don't walk, they strike out a ton. We don't necessarily know how that 389 BABIP is going to play. We know it's high, but with the larger bases, with the shift rules, with there's a bunch of things going on that potentially he can use his speed to turn it into a few more hits. I'm not necessarily going to go out there and set the max, the min pick on Bubba Thompson, but I think it's one of those things where, there's such a wide range in the 68 DCs that we have ADP for between 201 and 516. So, that's a tremendous range. So ADP is 320 at that point. If I don't have speed, maybe I take a chance on him. I like him more in fab leagues because if it doesn't work out, I can just throw him to the wire.
Yeah.
But I think we just have to look at him for that reason, whether we like it or not, and resist the urge to overdraft him. Taveras, on the other hand, I think he can be a solid, maybe 15-15 guy that, he's still only 24. He's one of those guys that feels like he's been around forever, but he's still on the younger side. If everything goes right for him, maybe 15-15. The 15 might be a little aggressive, and we're looking at 10-15. So 5th outfielder, chip in some stolen bases. I can live with it, but not somebody that's really going to be a major part of my draft plan.
Taveras is a lot more interesting to me, just because there's some semblance of contact ability. I mean, he had 84% zone contact, which is right below league average. 13% swing and strike rate. So you're thinking like, okay, 25, 26% strikeout rate, swings outside the zone, a third of the time. Not good, but not like bad. And we have seen already from him that we know he can steal bases, that he's got enough pop to play. And I think he's, a fairly good or a very good defender. So, like, I think Leody Taveras makes a lot of sense. What does not make sense is Bubba Thompson. What we saw last year, like, obviously the speed is legit. When he gets on base, like he can, steal bases. My argument is he is not going to be able to get on base with those plate skills. I know he hit 265 in this 181 plate appearance sample, but his XBA, his expected batting average, was 171, and it's because of those atrocious plate skills. If he was a qualified hitter, obviously he didn't come close to becoming a qualified hitter, didn't have enough plate appearances, but had he been a qualified hitter, he would have been tied for the third worst zone contact in all of baseball, and tied with who? Adolis Garcia. He had a swing and strike rate of 17.5%. That's like that like equates to like probably like a 35% strikeout rate, swing outside of the zone 40% of the time, which is awful. Yes, there's a lot of speed, but I think the only way he's gonna get to any of that speed is as a pinch runner. And like, yeah, maybe he will steal some bases if he's a pinch runner for the Rangers, but I think the Rangers want to compete, and there's no way if he continues at his rates that he's going to be able to stay at the majors like this. This is the epitome of a quad A player unless he makes massive improvements with his own contact.
And it's so crazy to me that Taveras is going a few rounds after him.
Mm-hmm.
But like the thing that I feel like is going to be frustrating with Thompson is you could have a week where he goes out there and he gets 1 or 2 starts in a week, pinch runs, steals 4 or 5 bases, and then you're looking at waiver pickups. So what, oh wow, Tom, there he goes. He stole 5 bases last week. And
and then you get all the garbage part of it.
Yep. And it's at what price?
Yeah, I don't even want to mess with it, honestly. Like, I mean, there's just probably no league where I will have Bubba Thompson, which is a bummer to me because I've had him in dynasty leagues for so long, and I finally traded him like at the beginning of last year, and then he came up and did what he did on somebody else's team. So that was a huge bummer for me. Josh Smith, like, is he gonna be a thing? Like, I don't feel like he's gonna.
Nah, there's nothing there that really stands out to me. From his ISO's below 200 in AAA. Is .052 in the majors last year. He's just one of he had 4 barrels and 168 batted balls last season. He could be a compiler if he plays every day. So there's value in that, but I think that's where it ends for me.
Yeah, I mean, he makes a lot of contact, but very little of it is hard contact. And that to me just like it screams again, one of these kind of quad A players that pitchers will challenge because they're not afraid of him hitting it over their head. And so I would be very surprised if the Rangers enter the season with either Josh Smith or Bubba Thompson as a regular outfielder. I think they've got to make a move. I wonder if they're the team that ends up with like Brian Reynolds.
Yeah, because at this point, all those quote unquote boring veterans have kind of signed somewhere.
Yeah.
So I mean, that would make sense for them.
Or maybe like a Max Kepler, like they, I know the Twins made a move to go get more pitching and get Pablo Lopez today. For those who don't know, we are recording this, a few days before it comes out. So if the Rangers make a move in the next couple days, it won't be on this episode. But like the Twins have been talking about trading Max Kepler for a little while. I wonder if there's, now that the Rangers have brought in all these arms for their rotation, I wonder if there's a trade that they can make that helps bolster the Twins rotation a little bit more and gets Max Kepler to Texas, or something similar to that with maybe another team. Let's move into that starting rotation. I mean, there's no question about Jacob deGrom's talent, right? Like on a per inning basis, he's the best pitcher in baseball, and I don't know that it's even particularly close. The question is, how many innings do you think he can actually get this year, and are you drafting him at what it's an expensive price, but it's a cheaper price than we're used to.
It is. It's you can get him around or maybe two later, depending. But I mean, that's what you really have to worry or think about is what is your stomach for risk here. And I mean, he does have 3 200+ inning seasons in a row. Then you had 2020, and then it was the last 2. And you wonder how much, was it environmental to a point with the Mets and their training staff? Was it because he wanted to be cautious because the new contract was coming up? Was it that he just truly was not healthy? I mean, I don't know that we're going to know. And there is more risk here than with others, but the reward is also greater. And with pitching, we could sit here all day and say this pitcher is more secure than the other. This pitcher is healthier than the other. We can feel better about them because they haven't been hurt. But we just never know, especially with pitching. So I haven't drafted him yet. I don't know that I have the stomach to do it, but I don't blame anybody for drafting him.
Yeah, I mean, it's been now 3 seasons since he's thrown more than 92 innings in a season. That being said, he's the best pitcher in baseball when he is pitching. And every projection system agrees with me when I say that. Not a single projection system on Fangraphs has him for worse than a 2.83 ERA. They all have him for pretty much 12 strikeouts per 9. None of them have him for a WHIP over 0.95. The question is, what can we reasonably project in terms of innings? And that's a really difficult question. When I did my projections, I gave him 140, and that made him the 3rd best pitcher in fantasy for 140 innings. I have such a risk aversion nowadays that it's really hard for me, and I have not yet pulled the trigger on him. But man, am I tempted every time his name comes up on my queue, and I'm sure I will at some point.
But I mean, again, to the point of, I think a 12-teamer is a lot different than a 15.
Yeah,
because of replacement value, and because you're getting something plus you're getting that 140.
Mm-hmm.
And if that 140 is putting him at number 3, then I think it's a no-brainer. But I mean, at the same time, if you got that, even if you're looking at a 15 team, if you got that 140, and then you even take a high upside, strong middle reliever that's going to get a few strikeouts a week when he's not there, I think you still it's convincing me more and more that he's worth it there, or at least worth taking a shot on.
I think in leagues where you have IL spots, he has to be a huge target for you. I mean, especially your 10s and your 12-team leagues. It just, there's no reason to fade him just on the chance that he is the best pitcher, and not just the best pitcher, but the best player in fantasy.
100% there.
Yeah, because I mean, if he ends up throwing 170 innings, he is not. It's not even close that he is not the best player in fantasy this year.
No.
Let's move on to another guy who was elite last year, but I don't know that anybody buys how elite he was. It's Martin Perez, who threw 196 innings, 2.89 ERA. He's not a big strikeout guy, and the WHIP wasn't great. We obviously expect some regression, but the question is how far?
This is somebody that I've found myself struggling with throughout draft season. I mean, last year, 6.5 home run to fly ball. Year prior, 16.1. His career is 11.9. So the ground ball rate did bump up a little bit compared to the year prior, 51.4% last year, but his career is 49.5. So I guess really the question is, what do we think about the long ball with Perez? We, everything else we kind of have a good idea of. Is he going to keep the ball on the ground more like he did last year than the few previous years? Is he going to be able to limit the home runs? I think if we can get comfort there, then I feel a little better about him. And then to that point, his launch angle against went down last year to 8.2 degrees, and he only had a 4.3% barrel rate. So if we get him at his xERA of 3.59 compared to the 2.89 ERA from last year, then I think he's a solid back end of the rotation option. And at an ADP of 313, I'm probably going to take that every time.
Yeah, this feels like the situations where, it feels like Adolis Garcia last year, right? Where everybody was yelling, oh, regression, to the point where like so many people were fading him, he became a value at the draft spot. And I feel like that is the same kind of situation we're in with Martin Perez, where everybody's yelling, well, he's got to regress. Well, of course he's got to regress. He had a sub-3 ERA. Like, we aren't expecting that. But I don't also expect him to be a 5 ERA guy or like a 4.5 ERA guy. Like, I expect him to be probably a high 3s ERA guy, a 125-ish whip that accumulates, 180 innings. So like the strikeout deficits we see on a per inning basis aren't as bad because he's going to get so many innings, comparatively speaking, to a lot of other pitchers. And I expect this Rangers team to be better. Like, I expect them to win more games. So I actually like Martin Perez quite a bit at his price. I think he's undervalued because of it. Like, this wasn't like this came out of nowhere either. He made a conscious decision to stop throwing the four-seamer as much, throw the sinker more, get ground balls, let the defense behind pick him up, get out of innings quickly so he could go deeper into games. Like, this was a change that happened because of a change in approach. And I like, especially staying in Texas in that good ballpark, I like that to kind of continue.
Yeah, I was going to say I like the value there.
Yeah. Jon Gray seemed to be on his way to a breakout in his first season at Texas, and then kind of had his season derailed a little bit by injury. Are you buying in on Jon Gray at the price?
The price on Gray is a little more aggressive than Perez. He strikes out more. He strikes out more guys. So to me, so as a start point, I like him. I think he's a better pitcher than Perez is. I think it's a fair price. I don't know that it's a smash spot or somebody that I'm going to fade. I think overall, we're going to get around the 4 ERA with a little over a strikeout per inning. And I think that's for a team that's going to be better. I think that's okay with me.
Yeah, I like Jon Gray at the price. I think the only thing we have to kind of worry about is we have yet to really have a full season of Jon Gray, right? He hasn't reached 150 innings since 2019. He's good when he is on the mound, but like he always seems to be nicked up with something. I like him, but and the price isn't bad or anything, but like it's not as good as I had kind of hoped it was going to be, especially with how deep the starting pitching pool is this year. So he'll definitely end up on a few of my teams, but he's not a major target in the way I thought he was going to be coming into draft season.
I feel like he's almost being drafted as if he was healthier last year.
Yeah, absolutely. Only through 127 innings. That's, he's not elite to the point where we can go, well, I can make up those innings later. He has to hit the 150 for me to feel really good about where I'm getting him. Andrew Heaney, I will fall for it every time. Absolutely every time. Like, it does not matter. Charlie Brown kicking the football, fourth team or third or fourth team now. The skills are great when he's on the mound. He's just very rarely on the mound. Are you buying into Andrew Heaney at all?
I think it's a similar story to Gray. Get him a few rounds later. So from that standpoint, I like it a little better. I I don't think he's going to strike out almost 13 and a half guys per 9 like he did last year. But home runs could be a bit of a problem. But I still think we're looking at about a 4 ERA. $1 million question is how many innings do we get out of him? I think Gray is the better pitcher. Heaney might be the better option based on the price if we have the same injury concerns about him. I mean, 180 innings in 2018, and other than that, he only has 2 other years where he's broken 100. So I mean, we talked about Gray, not really making it through a full season. It's even more difficult with Heaney.
Yeah, I mean, you probably should avoid him. I love the skills. I always have. I mean, if you listen to my stuff for the last, few years, I've raved about like Andrew Heaney, like he's gonna be a thing. But I mean, at some point, I have to like maybe come to the realization that this is the same feeling I had about Garrett Richards, and he never turned into a thing either. That being said, I'm gonna fall for it again. I mean, I love the skills. I love the new ballpark. Love the outfield defense that we're gonna see in Texas. With guys like Leody Taveras and Adolis Garcia, and hopefully whoever else they bring in to man that third spot. I mean, it's really only best suited for leagues where you have IL spots and like 10 and 12 team leagues where there's replacement value, because he is just about guaranteed to miss time. Like, all the projection systems right now have him for like 130 to 140 innings, and that is really pushing it because he has not crossed 130 innings since 2018. So like you just can't. I don't know that you can pencil in. I think I penciled him in for like 125, just because there's no way like I can think that he's going to get more than that. Nathan Eovaldi is another guy very similar to Andrew Heaney in terms of he is good when he's healthy, but he was not healthy last year, and he is not healthy very often. I'm completely fading Eovaldi until I see him in spring training and see what his velocity is, because without the velocity, and he did not have it last year, he is just atrocious. Where are you at on Eovaldi?
I mean, I agree on the velocity. It was down about a mile per hour on average, 1.5 last year than prior. I think of the 3 guys we just talked about, I think I might be higher on Eovaldi than Gray and Heaney. I mean, part of that, again, is you get another round discount on Eovaldi, but he's also coming out of the AL East, so I think that helps. His ERA last year on the road was about half of what it was at home, so we get a little bit of a pickup there. He doesn't walk guys. He's consistently on, last few years he's been consistently under 2 walks per 9, other than in 2019. So to me, you get the strikeout per inning. Obviously, yes, he needs to be healthy. The velocity needs to be back. But if I'm going to take a chance on a quasi-injured, health-concerned Ranger pitcher, I want the most discount I can get. And I'm thinking that Eovaldi getting out of Fenway and getting out of the AL East helps here as well.
Sure. They actually have an insane amount of pitching depth. Jake Odorizzi, Dane Dunning, Glenn Otto, Cole Reagans, Spencer Howard, Cole Winn. Their triple rotation is going to be better than a number of teams' major league rotation. Do we care about any of these guys for fantasy this year, though?
I mean, maybe somebody like Odorizzi is a streaming option if he moves into the rotation, but I don't know that he's necessarily anything more than that. I think Dunning and Howard are 2 interesting arms that have had varying levels of buzz kind of over the past few years that, again, if everything clicks right for them, or more likely if there's a trade, maybe one of those going like a Brian Reynolds trade or something else looking for a bat, I think I'm keeping an eye on them more, especially Dunning, if they get moved. Because if you get moved, especially like a team like Pittsburgh, where you go right into the rotation there, then we might be looking at something. So from that standpoint, the radar, but right now I think it's going to be hard.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Is Jose Leclerc the closer? Is there another guy that you think's the closer? Who are you? Are you drafting a Rangers potential closer? And who do you think it is?
I am drafting Leclerc as the closer based on the fact that he appears to be healthy. They picked up his $6 million option. He got through 47 innings last year. He did pick up 7 saves. I mean, again, he's a closer. The ERA was sub 3. If you look at the xFIP, the FIP, the xERA, all that stuff, kind of goes, everything goes up from that ERA. Doesn't really get many ground balls, but he can strike you out, and he has experience, and he has some experience. I mean, I think Leclerc, 12 saves in 2018, 14 saves in 2019. So it's not like we can necessarily say, hey, this guy's really done it before and he was the closer. It's more or less, hey, he has experience in the situation, in the role. He's shown he can do it. He's had varying results. I think maybe he's one of the better mid-tier second closers, maybe a good third, but more likely a second closer. I think, depending on the format, Jonathan Hernandez is very interesting. As a handcuff, he only had 4 saves last year, but again, there's variability there as well, and he walked 5 guys per 9 innings, so then maybe you go down to like a Joe Barlow, who has had success previously as well, and I think he's being almost forgotten about at this point.
Yeah, I think Leclerc is the guy, at least to start the season. And if he can keep some of the gains we saw when he came back in 2022, like, I think he could be a really, really good guy. Like, I don't think enough people are talking about the fact that, like, yes, his walks per 9 was almost 4, but that's actually really good for Jose Leclerc. Like, we're talking about a guy who's had like 6, 7 walks per 9 in his career before. He had the highest first pitch strike rate of his career. He was actually trying to go into the zone. He's almost like kind of like Robbie Raying it in some fashion, where he's going, listen, I got good stuff and I'm just going to come at you. If you hit it, you hit it. But, and I think that might actually work for him, because I think his biggest issue has been like he walks too many guys and then he gives up the home run. If you're going to give up the home run, give up the home run, but just make sure it's a solo shot. Like,
Exactly.
don't let it be a 2 or 3 run shot and bury your team when you've got a 2-run lead. So I think Leclerc's very interesting. I do think Jonathan Hernandez is kind of the fallback guy. And I do like his stuff if he's healthy, but both Leclerc and Jonathan Hernandez have had serious histories of injuries. And you're right, Joe Barlow is being completely forgotten about in this bullpen. So it would not surprise me if at the end of the day, a guy like Joe Barlow leads the team in saves, because both Hernandez and Leclerc have had walk issues, homer issues, and injury issues. So this is definitely not a situation I want to bank on. I hope if you are drafting a guy like Leclerc, he's your third closer.
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, the price has been more second in a lot of situations, but yeah,
he's not going to be my second closer, that's for sure. All right. Thanks so much for joining me. Really appreciate it.
You got it, man. Thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Remind everybody where you can reach again, and then plug everything you got going over at Fantasy Alarm.
I'm on Twitter at Ray_Kuhn_28. And right now you can find my work covering NBA DFS, but then once the MLB season starts, you'll find me doing waiver wire and some MLB DFS. And also, once we get our draft guide going up, I'm going to be contributing the player capsules for the NL West.
Nice. You can find me on Twitter at FWFB. Email me or the show, friendsoffantasybenefits@gmail.com. Writing daily at Fangraphs, doing these 30-team previews in 30 days, but we're starting to get close to wrapping those up, and we're going to continue with some more pods than you're probably used to from the Friends of Fantasy Benefits feed, even once these are done. Give us a 5-star review. Really, really helps us out and gets you entered in to win one of those free RotoWare shirts. We'll be giving away one a month till the start of the season. On this podcast, TGFBI podcast, and of course the Sleeper and the Bus podcast. For Ray and myself, thank you for listening. Have a fantastic baseball offseason.